My last video was all about my CNC machine, and you can watch that right up here if you want to. But the one thing I didn't mention in that video was my dust collection hood. The concept that makes this dust shoe work is that there is nowhere for the dust to get out except into the hose. There's only about a 20 thousandths gap under the dust shoe, and the hole for the collet is just big enough for the collet. As you may have already caught on, the dust shoe does not move with the router. There are some limitations to it, and you need to be aware of this. First off, it really only works on flat material. And the other limitation is that you cannot clamp on top of the material. So there's 3 clamping options that I know of that clamp below the material. There's a vacuum table, there's cam clamps that clamp on the edge of the material, or there's the system that I showed in my last video, where it uses a piece of plywood to clamp on a groove in the edge of the material. These systems all have their own advantages, but you just need to know you can't use a clamp like this, or you'll run into it, obviously. This thing works great, but the problem that you can clearly see is that you cannot clearly see. In fact, you can't see the bit at all. So I'm going to try to make a new one with good visibility. Let's get started. When you have to work with thin material, then the clamps are still taller than that. So this is about as low as I can put the dust collection shoe. I'm going to try to solve that problem too. And let's see about sawdust. You can see there's a lot of sawdust back there. By the way, this was completely clean before. And over here, a lot of sawdust there. Quite a bit here. And the floor. Look at that floor. I have to sweep that right away. I also took a V-bit and cut a groove around here on both of them. But actually, don't make the same silly mistake as I did. This one needs to be a mirror image of this one. Not like this. You probably noticed this little piece that I made, and it has some divots in it. I need to make some matching holes in the bottom of this piece. I need to make sure that this hole is big enough for this hose. I cut it a little undersized so I can sand it to a perfect fit. I'm going to assemble these two pieces 1 inch apart using a piece of clear plastic in this groove, and that way I can see inside of here. And to do that, I'm just going to use some silicone, put a little bead in this slot around here, and then insert a piece of 1 inch wide plastic. I couldn't find any plastic like I wanted in town, so I guess I have to just clean out a peanut butter jar. I have not measured the circumference of this, but I think I can kind of see that it's not going to be enough to go around this. So in order to get a long enough strip for that, I'm going to have to spiral my cut up and around. There we go. I was planning to use silicone for this, but this thing is just so, I think it's going to be about impossible to get it in the entire slot all at once. So instead I'm going to just try to use hot glue. I managed to get the other side in place without glue, but it took me a long time to get it in. There is no chance I'm going to get that together with hot glue in there. So I'm just going to try to run a bead of hot glue around the outside, and I hope that holds. I think it's done. So this is gonna mount to the CNC just like that. I need to make some kind of block that goes on this end to mount to this. And by the way, right now is a good time to take a good look at this, because you're gonna need to make something like that to mount to your CNC if you're gonna make a dust hood like this. As you can see on the old one, I have this piece of 3/4 inch plywood with 2 dados in it for these pieces. So I made exactly the same sort of piece for the new one. I think this will work to just clamp this. Just making sure it fits as it should. Remember those divots in the bottom? You probably already guessed that these are for magnets. So I'm just gonna mix up some epoxy. I just made a very typical, very stupid mistake. I forgot about the orientation. Good thing I have a duress to ice pick. All right, let's bolt this on. It's actually a lot more rigid than you'd expect. Okay, that's mounted nice and secure, but now what are these for? Well, this one, which is just kind of an oversized ring, increases the surface area that's contacting the wood, I guess. So if you're working with big pockets or anywhere where the dust could escape through a part that you've already cut, this is going to cover more of that pocket, so it's going to prevent dust from escaping. It just makes it a little more efficient. However, it does need to be removable, because if you have this thing all the way up working with really thick material and then you plunge the router all the way, the router will hit this. So by removing this, you don't have to raise it up quite as high. The other one I made, this one here, it's as narrow as possible, and I actually cut 2 rings. Those need to be glued together. That one is for when I have to work with thinner material. Basically, it increases the clearance underneath it, except for this little part. Now, I just got another idea, and it's kind of a half-baked idea. Well, actually, it's not baked at all. Basically, I want to make another one of these that has a brush on it to help seal on uneven material and to be able to go over clamps and that kind of thing. I don't know yet what I would make the brush out of or anything. I'm not a fan of the brush type dust hoods, but they have their place, and it would be nice to have an attachment for this thing that has a brush on it. Now all that's left to do is make a cut and see if it works. Here's what I'm about to cut. First, there's a pocket that's a 1/2 inch deep, about 4 inches by 3 inches. So that's going to be a lot of sawdust, and also being a pocket, there's kind of places for it to escape. Then there's some profile cuts, each of them being 3/8 of an inch deep. All of this will be done with a 1/4 inch down spiral router bit. I just discovered another advantage to this magnetic attachment. This setup would be by far the most effective using a shop vac. I don't have one in the shop right now, so I'm going to try to use my big Cyclone dust collector instead. If this works, that means that dust shoe is extremely efficient, because this thing only pulls about 7 inches of vacuum, which means it's going to be moving very, very low CFM. So if this works, that's a good sign. Well, the cut was a success, but dust collection, we see a little bit of dust here. This is not perfect. Now, I think mostly that was because of these. The bit was peeling out these little pieces, and they were getting stuck in here, and I think that was limiting the airflow. After I stopped the machine and pulled these pieces out, I started getting quite a bit better dust collection. I guess more testing is required. This time, instead of a raster, I'm using an offset cut. That's not going to generate these little pieces. And I also cleaned the filter in my dust collector, so hopefully it gets a little more efficient collection. So I'm going to say that's acceptable. That's 99 times better than it was before, but I want to try to make it 100 times better than it was before, so I'm going to try a shop vac. I've been looking around the tabletop some here, and I'm really not finding any dust at all except right here on this corner. You can see there's just a few particles there. There's a piece here, a couple of them there, one there. There's one particle there. And over here, there's just about 5 of them there. I'm real happy with that, but it's not worth putting up with the noise of the shop vac to get the extra efficiency. I'm just going to use my big dust collector. So, as always, there's a SketchUp drawing on my website. It might not be super helpful because your CNC is going to be different than mine, but it also includes the table and these clamps. So if you're interested in a drawing for those, you can go check that out. All right, that's it. Thanks a lot for watching.